The following presentation is not suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised. On July 16, 2019, Tirani Kid experienced the same sensation that about 400,000 people on Earth would also feel that day. She went into labor. So, the former high school track star did what any of those folks would do. She checked herself in to the nearest hospital, Spring Hill Memorial in Mobile, Alabama. Tirani had every reason to expect a safe and healthy delivery. She had every reason to expect excellent care from Spring Hill. Only, not all was well at Spring Hill. 8 days earlier, Spring Hill was hit by a ransomware attack. Cybercriminals infiltrated Spring Hill's network and downloaded malicious software called malware onto its servers. The cybercriminals then encrypted Spring Hill's network, making it impossible for doctors and nurses to access patient records. They also shut down Spring Hill's computers, rendering them useless, unless Spring Hill paid tens of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, its doctors, nurses, and other employees scrambled to adjust to a new normal: paper-based medical records. In some cases, they literally had to draw graphs representing patients' vital signs. This is called paper charting. As you can imagine, most nurses haven't had to do this for decades. The older nurses on staff had to quickly teach the younger nurses how to paper chart while also keeping their patients alive. But Spring Hill told Tirani none of this. Publicly, the hospital insisted that it merely had suffered a security incident, which wouldn't affect patient care. Tirani was admitted to the hospital and given a room. Normally, Tirani and her baby's vital signs would have been displayed on a bank of monitors at the nurses' station, along with all the other patients on the ward. Every nurse and doctor could see it and respond to an emergency. But today, a single printer was designated to print out alerts about any anomalies, and a single nurse was assigned to monitor it. This is how nobody realized that Tirani's unborn baby was losing oxygen. This is why Tirani did not get a C-section. Tirani gave birth to her daughter, Nico Sila. When Nico was born, her umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, and she sustained brain damage. The attending physician would later text the head nurse demanding an explanation. "I need you to help me understand why I was not notified," she wrote. This was preventable. Tirani was devastated, of course. In December, Tirani and Nico took family photos celebrating their first Christmas together. The following April, Nico passed away. Tirani wanted justice. The week after Nico's birth, she filed a lawsuit against Spring Hill, seeking damages for her daughter's condition. But she also wanted answers. Tirani didn't know it yet, but she and her daughter were two victims among thousands. Spring Hill was just one of the hundreds of hospitals hit with ransomware. And all of these attacks could be traced back to the same place: Russia. And specifically, one of the most successful cybercrime gangs in the world. One that would come to be known as Wizard Spider. On this episode, ransomware, Russia, and the lucrative world of online extortion. I'm Keith Korneluk, and you're listening to Modem Mischief. You're listening to Modem Mischief. In this series, we explore the darkest reaches of the internet. We'll take you into the minds of the world's most notorious hackers and the lives affected by them. We'll also show you places you won't find on Google and what goes on down there. This is the story of Wizard Spider. What's up, everybody? So I've been getting some emails and a few DMs about ideas for new episodes of the show. And I'm here to tell you, I love that. So if there's a new story or a topic that you'd like us to cover on an episode of Modem Mischief, just slide into my DMs or email me directly. My email address is keith@modemmischief.com. My suggestion box is always open to my listeners. I appreciate your feedback and your suggestions. Hell, that's why I make the show. And while you're emailing, consider leaving us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast player, or leave us a review if you're able to. It helps the show, and it feeds my ego just enough to keep me moving, but not enough to become an actual narcissist. Oh, and one more thing. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. For just $5 a month, you'll receive an ad-free version of the show, plus bonus episodes exclusive to subscribers. As of this recording, we've got, checking notes, 16 of them now. So head over to patreon.com/modemmischief or click the link in the show notes. You can also support us through a paid subscription on Apple Podcasts. Just look for Modem Mischief Elite to get that feature. All right, that's it, everybody. And now, on with the show. Today, ransomware is responsible for about $20 billion in damages annually. But how did things get to this point? And why is Russia such a ransomware hotbed? It's all because someone didn't get a job. And that someone was Dr. Joseph Popp. Popp was an early AIDS researcher with a degree in evolutionary biology from Harvard. In 1989, he applied for a job at the World Health Organization. He was denied. Dr. Popp was outraged and he wanted revenge. He decided to exact that revenge on the worldwide community of AIDS researchers. He developed a program that would encrypt files on a computer, calling it PC Cyborg Trojan. Dr. Popp hid this Trojan on a 5¼ floppy disk, which he labeled the AIDS Information Introductory Diskette. Dr. Popp made 20,000 copies of these floppy disks, costing him $10,000. Then he obtained the mailing list for the magazine PC Business World, which he knew many AIDS researchers subscribed to. Dr. Popp packaged the disks into 20,000 envelopes, labeled them with 20,000 addresses, and mailed them around the world. Thousands of unsuspecting AIDS researchers slipped these disks into their computers, thinking they held important AIDS research. Dr. Popp's Trojan lay dormant until the user rebooted their computer 89 times. On the 90th reboot, it would display a message warning them that their files were encrypted. To unlock them, victims had to send $189 to a P.O. box in Panama. Only, it wasn't as scary as it seemed. Tech-savvy victims quickly learned that the Trojan's encryption was amateurish. One IT person in Belgium created a decryption key in just 10 minutes and released it for free. Still, more than 1,000 computers were infected, and some researchers lost their life's work. As for Dr. Popp, the law eventually caught up to him. He was charged with several counts of blackmail and had a nervous breakdown. While in prison, he was observed wearing cardboard boxes like clothing, putting rollers in his hair to protect against radiation and microorganisms, and hanging condoms on his nose. As a result, Dr. Popp was deemed unfit for trial. This might have been the end of the history of ransomware. For the 1990s and early 2000s, few criminals used it to extort people. True, encryption technology got better than Dr. Popp's primitive attempt, but the problem was money. Criminals had no way to securely transfer money online without it being traced. This all changed when Satoshi Nakamoto mined the first Bitcoin in 2009. And if you'd like to learn more than you ever wanted to know about Bitcoin and the history of crypto, check out episode 41 about Ruja Ignatova, aka Crypto Queen, and OneCoin. Suffice it to say, Bitcoin offered a mostly secure way for criminals to accept a ransom payment. Soon, ransomware would become a thriving business, mainly centered in Russia. But why is Russia such a hotbed of cybercrime? In short, the Soviet Union created a top-notch education system, especially for computer engineering. But then, the Soviet Union dissolved in December of 1991. Russia's economy collapsed. As a result, a generation of highly educated computer programmers couldn't find work. Well, legal work anyway. And then, Vladimir Putin was elected president in 2000. Under Putin's leadership, Russia turned a blind eye to its ever-growing cybercriminal community, so long as cyber crooks obeyed these 3 rules. Number 1. Don't hack Russian targets. Number 2. Give Russia a cut of the proceeds. And number 3. If Russia needs a favor, you do it. Which brings us to the ransomware group Wizard Spider. Now, point of clarification. Wizard Spider got its name from the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. We still don't know what Wizard Spider's members actually call the group. CrowdStrike coined the name in 2020, at least 5 years after Wizard Spider was operational. Before this, it was referred to by the names of the malware it uses: Dyer, TrickBot, Ryuk, or Conti. Yes, it's confusing, not to mention hard to pronounce. We also don't know the names or identities of many of its members. This is often the case with stories about cybercriminal groups, especially those located in and protected by countries hostile to the United States, like Russia. And we can only tell you about a small slice of the crimes Wizard Spider has committed. Partly, this is due to time constraints. Wizard Spider has committed thousands of ransomware attacks, but it's also because we don't know exactly how many crimes it's actually committed. Many of the company's Wizard Spider attacks decides to keep the security breach to themselves so as not to appear vulnerable. They simply pay the ransom, upgrade their systems, and move on. Having said all that, we do know a lot about Wizard Spider. This isn't some small-time outfit of geeks living in their parents' basements. Wizard Spider functions more like a corporation than a criminal gang, divided into teams with different responsibilities. It's unknown exactly how many members belong to Wizard Spider, but probably a couple of hundred. They would often be recruited online from hacker forums on both the clear and the dark web. Some recruits knew they were joining a criminal gang, while others were just kept in the dark. Most lived in Russian cities like St. Petersburg and Moscow, but some lived in former Soviet countries like Belarus and the Ukraine. Almost all were men between the ages of 25 and 40. They joined to make money and stick it to what they saw as arrogant American corporations. One such member was Vladimir Dunayev. Born in Russia in 1983, he was part of the generation of Russian computer programmers who struggled to find work. For Wizard Spider, Dunayev specialized in developing web browser extensions that concealed the gang's malware from antivirus software. Another was Alla Witti. She was born in Latvia in 1966 and learned computer programming relatively late in life after she had 2 children. When her first husband died, she was forced to move to the South American country of Suriname. Desperate for work, she accepted an $800 a month gig from Wizard Spider, unaware of what the group actually did. Whenever the group started, and whoever was involved, their first criminal activities began around Halloween 2014. Their first attacks were relatively simple. Say Wizard Spider wanted to rob a corporation called Company A. Wizard Spider operative would start with a spear phishing email. They would message hundreds of Company A employees inviting them to open an email attachment. It would have a harmless title like Invoice. In reality, the attachment would be infested with malware, which would soon spread throughout Company A's system. In the early days, Wizard Spider used a malware called Dyer, spelled D-Y-R-E. It was programmed to monitor hundreds of banking websites. Once Company A employee tried to log on to the company's bank accounts, Dyer would generate an error message, saying the bank was experiencing technical issues. It would direct the Company A employee to call the bank's customer service hotline to sort it out. Of course, customer service was controlled by Wizard Spider. This way, Wizard Spider would harvest banking information for companies like the American paint giant Sherwin-Williams. A couple of days before Halloween 2014, a Sherwin-Williams employee noticed a $6.45 million in funds were transferred from its corporate account to organizations across China, Latvia, Liechtenstein, and the Netherlands. Obvious fraud. Other victims include the Irish budget airline Ryanair, which Wizard Spider soaked for $4.8 million, and an Ohio-based engine parts company called Maiba Bearings US, which lost $4.8 million. Dozens more unnamed companies lost up to $1.5 million each. By 2015, Wizard Spider was responsible for more than a quarter of the world's financial cybercrime. But despite its initial success, Wizard Spider's operation were almost over as quickly as they began. In November of 2015, Reuters reported that Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, arrested several members of Wizard Spider. Of course, this report couldn't rely on first-hand sources. The FSB certainly wasn't going to speak to a Western news agency. As a result, the number of people arrested and their names are unknown. The FSB didn't explain why they were arresting the group. Like we said, There are 3 ways a Russian hacking group can run afoul of the law in Russia. 1. Hacking Russian targets. 2. Not giving Russia a cut of the proceeds. Or 3. Refusing a request to hack on Russia's behalf. Wizard Spider hadn't hacked anyone in Russia, and it's unlikely the Russian government would have tried to use a group as new as Wizard Spider as one of its proxies. That left a second option, not giving Russia a cut. Further lending credence to this theory is the fact that the FSB released everyone soon after the arrests, without any charges. The FSB clearly didn't want to punish them, it just wanted to remind them that Mother Russia always gets a taste. After the FSB set them straight, Wizard Spider changed tactics. First, it replaced Dyer with a network of hacked computers called TrickBot. It had many uses. Yes, TrickBot could still be used to steal banking information, but it could also be used to deploy ransomware. One nasty one was called Ryuk. Named after a demon from the Japanese anime, Ryuk was especially dangerous because it could encrypt entire network drives as well as data. With Ryuk and TrickBot, Wizard Spider could now conduct ransomware attacks more effectively. Now, like we said, this was a relatively new tool in the cybercriminals toolbox. By mid-2018, when Wizard Spider began using Ryuk, the average ransomware payment was just $6,000. This meant nothing to a company like Sherwin-Williams, worth $30 billion. So when it came to ransomware, Wizard Spider focused on smaller targets with limited resources. School districts like Avon or Coventry in Ohio, local governments like that of Lake City, Florida, or regional hospitals like Spring Hill Memorial, where Tirani Kid's daughter Nico Sylar's daughter was born with brain damage. Within 2 years, the average ransomware payment would rise from $6,000 to $230,000. But what else was going on in late 19 and early 2020? If you're a human being, you probably remember the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID would only make Wizard Spider's victims more desperate, hospitals especially, but also schools that would need to offer virtual learning, or governments that would need to conduct business. Now, at this point in the story, you might be wondering who besides Russia's FSB was doing anything about this. As usual, the cybersecurity community was way ahead of the cops in studying and identifying Wizard Spider's activities and members. One such expert was Lawrence Abrams. He was the founder of the cybersecurity news site called bleepingcomputer.com. The son of New York garment workers, he was drawn to computers as a child. He'd been tracking ransomware since 2012. His site was both a leading authority on the subject as well as a gathering place for ransomware experts and cybersecurity professionals. Abrams himself communicated with several ransomware gangs regularly. On St. Patrick's Day 2020, few people were out celebrating due to the oncoming COVID crisis. That day, Abrams emailed several ransomware gangs, including Wizard Spider. His message was simple. Stop attacking hospitals and other medical facilities for the duration of the pandemic. Too many lives are at stake. The next day, he received many responses. The first one was from Doppelpaymer, a ransomware gang primarily located in Germany and the Ukraine. We always try to avoid hospitals, nursing homes, not only now. If we hit a hospital by mistake, we will decrypt it for free. A second unnamed group wrote back. We work very diligently in choosing our targets. We never target nonprofits, hospitals, schools, or government organizations. A third group, Maze, posted a reply directly to its own website. We also stop all activity versus all kinds of medical organizations until the stabilization of the situation with virus. But Wizard Spider never replied. If anything, COVID would only make the group bolder and more dangerous. By September 2020, COVID-19 was rampaging across the United States, with almost 7 million cases reported around the country. This pushed an already strained healthcare industry to the limit. Hospitals were facing shortages in open beds and critical supplies, while hospital workers were overworked, exhausted, and exposed to the potentially deadly COVID infections daily. One healthcare company enduring this strain was Universal Health Services. Unless you're a healthcare professional or you followed the stock market, you probably haven't heard of UHS. Based in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, UHS manages more than 400 hospitals, behavioral health centers, labs, and pharmacies across the US, Puerto Rico, and the UK. In 2019, it served 3.5 million patients and brought in $11.4 billion in revenue. In other words, UHS was much bigger than the small regional hospital networks that Wizard Spider typically attacked. Around 2 a.m. on September 27, 2020, Eastern Time, employees at UHS facilities around the world began having trouble with their computers. Nurses would find the computers began slowing down before stopping entirely, and then they were unable to turn them back on. Worse, the company's IT specialists noticed that files were being encrypted. A mysterious program was changing file extensions to .ryk, evidence that the Ryuk malware was involved. Worse than that, those frontline employees got no word from corporate on what was happening or what to do. So they took to Reddit, where they posted anonymously about their situations. Slowly, they pieced together that the entire company was the victim of a cyber attack. Nurses, doctors, pharmacists, and other UHS employees were forced to rely on pen and paper records to keep track of their patients' medication, medical histories, and surgical procedures, just like we saw at Spring Hill Medical Center and scores of other small hospitals. Fortunately, this time, no one died. Almost immediately, the cybersecurity community attributed the attack to Wizard Spider, thanks to its use of Ryuk. UHS's IT department needed 3 weeks to get the company up and running again. Overall, the attack cost $67 million in IT repairs and lost revenue, and it's unknown if it paid the ransom. But the UHS attack reflected a shift in Wizard Spider's tactics. Gone were the days of stealing banking information, as well as the days of small-time ransomware attacks. Now they were focused on so-called big game hunting, or holding large corporations and organizations for ransom. Universal Health Services was just the start. Naturally, this just made Wizard Spider more conspicuous. The cybersecurity community was already monitoring its activities. UHS was cooperating with the FBI, which brought the case to the Justice Department's attention too. But these cyber attacks started in 2014. Why was the Justice Department only doing something about it 6 years later? Since 9/11, the federal government's top priorities were terrorism and counterintelligence, with cybercrime a distant third. But that would change during the 2016 presidential election. Like we covered in episode 6, Russian government-backed hackers assisted Donald Trump by stealing embarrassing emails from the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. They gave them to WikiLeaks to publish, contributing to Hillary Clinton's surprise loss. Trump might have welcomed this assistance, but hundreds of Americans in government and law enforcement were now aware of the threat posed by Russia and other antagonistic countries. And those Americans in government and law enforcement were free to do something about the Russian threat. One such agency was the United States Cyber Command, or US Cybercom. It was created in 2009 as part of the National Security Agency and became its own agency in 2017. US Cybercom's original mission was to protect the Defense Department's computer network from cyber attacks. But over the following decade, US Cybercom evolved into a more aggressive, forward-thinking organization. By 2020, instead of waiting passively for America's enemies to disrupt its computer networks, US Cybercom was attacking them first. Which brings us back to Wizard Spider and the September 2020 attack on Universal Health Services. By this point, Wizard Spider extorted scores of companies for millions of dollars. Even so, that was hardly the sort of thing that got the attention of the American military. Instead, US Cybercom was concerned that Wizard Spider could use TrickBot to disrupt the upcoming election between Trump and Biden, which was about a month away. Trump might have welcomed more Russian election interference, but US Cybercom wasn't having it. And so, on September 22, 2020, cybersecurity experts monitoring the servers that hosted TrickBot noticed something strange. TrickBot's network was run on more than 1 million hijacked computers. Wizard Spider controlled them with a command and control server. But that night in September, the cybersecurity community watched in stunned awe as TrickBot's command and control servers stopped communicating with its network. Clearly, someone had infected TrickBot with malware, turning the tables on the ransomware criminals. A few weeks later, 4 anonymous members of the U.S. Cybercom team confirmed to the Washington Post that the agency was responsible for the disruption. True, this was hardly a hiccup as far as WizardSpider was concerned. Its activities were back online within a day. Yet this was a turning point. U.S. Cybercom wasn't just disrupting TrickBot. It was also gathering information on WizardSpider and its members, using methods still not disclosed to the public. It passed this information on to the FBI and the Justice Department, which now could finally begin its prosecutions. WizardSpider showed no signs of slowing down, but things would never be the same. Election Day came on Tuesday, November 3rd, while COVID-19 continued to rage. It took 4 days of counting ballots, many of them absentee, until Joe Biden was declared the winner. TrickBot played no role in the result. As far as cybersecurity was concerned, President Biden enthusiastically supported the ongoing efforts to disrupt and prosecute WizardSpider, but he had his work cut out for him. Soon, WizardSpider struck again. The Baltimore County Public School System is the country's 24th largest school district, which serves 115,000 students. 3 weeks after Biden's victory, WizardSpider hit the BCPSS with Ryuk, encrypting files and forcing all online learning to stop for 3 days. BCPSS still hasn't indicated whether it paid WizardSpider's ransom, but recovering from the cyber attack cost $10 million. Also around this time, WizardSpider began to discontinue the use of its Ryuk ransomware and instead conducted its attacks using a new strain called Conti. Like many details in this story, the origins of Conti and WizardSpider's reasons for replacing Ryuk with it are murky. As one cybersecurity reporter puts it, criminals are not known for telling the truth. But what they say is usually the only explanation for a disappearance, even if it is a lie. Conti first appeared in February 2020, and it appeared to be a separate Russian criminal gang. The major difference between Conti and Ryuk was that Conti was run on a ransomware-as-a-service model. In other words, Conti paid third-party affiliates to actually execute its ransomware attacks. So it's possible Conti really was a separate criminal gang that WizardSpider just absorbed. However, further analysis revealed that Conti borrowed much of its source code from Ryuk, which meant, most likely, the same people were behind it. While Conti was a more sophisticated version of Ryuk, it certainly wasn't entirely a new malware strain. So why would WizardSpider go to all this trouble? Likely, it was a ruse to throw off investigators who were still struggling to catch up. Using Conti, WizardSpider would be responsible for hundreds more ransomware attacks. One of the most prominent came on St. Patrick's Day 2021. The people of Ireland weren't out celebrating. Not more than a year into the COVID-19 pandemic. By then, Ireland had 230,000 COVID cases out of a population of only 5 million. This meant that Ireland's publicly funded healthcare system, the Health Service Executive, or HSE, was under considerable strain. Sometime in January 2020, an HSE employee received a phishing email with an Excel attachment, which they unwittingly opened. This downloaded Conti onto the system. It would lurk there for 8 weeks, called its dwell time, until that fateful St. Paddy's Day when thousands of HSE employees opened their computers to find the following message. All of your files are currently encrypted by a Conti strain. As you know, if you don't just Google it, all of the data has been encrypted by our software and cannot be removed by any means without contacting our team directly. There were links to 2 websites, one on the dark web and one on the clear, contirecovery.best. The message continued. You should be aware, just in case you try to ignore us. We downloaded a pack of your internal data and are ready to publish it on our news website if you don't respond. So it will be better for both sides if you contact us as soon as possible. 70,000 computers were infected at 4,000 locations, 54 hospitals, amounting to 80% of systems encrypted. Additionally, 700 gigs of personal data were stolen, including personal information about patients and employees, and now were being held as collateral. In this case, the Irish government responded by literally deploying the military. The HSE immediately contacted the Irish Defence Forces Communications and Information Service Corps to ask for help with decrypting the files. The Irish military deployed members of the Army Reserve who were so-called ethical hackers, thanks to their day jobs working in cybersecurity. Still, it took until September for the HSE to regain access to 95% of its files, and it cost the HSE more than $600 million. Only, not all was going well for WizardSpider. The attack on the HSE was WizardSpider's biggest and most destructive yet. Yet according to messages later discovered by investigators, some members of the group weren't on board with attacking a hospital. Apparently, the HSE attack was the work of a rogue member who went by the name Dollar. Dollar's supervisor wrote to their boss, who went by Mango, to inform him that Dollar issued an attack without permission. "Dollar's an asshole," the supervisor wrote. "He then told me that he agreed with you to hack the hospital, and now he put the hospital again. This is disrespect. 2 times I told him we do not touch the medical sector." Hearing this, an angry Mango confronted Dollar. "You are more problems than good. Everyone complains about you and gets angry. You've damaged Conti's reputation by targeting hospitals." Never mind that WizardSpider had already been attacking hospitals for years. On top of the group's internal dissent, it was also making many enemies. Thanks to the earlier Ryuk attacks, WizardSpider was already the subject of investigations by the United States Cyber Command, the U.S. Justice Department, and other legal systems around the world, and dozens of corporations and cybersecurity companies. And by mid-2021, those investigations were starting to pay off. That summer, the FBI identified and caught 2 members of the WizardSpider gang, both of whom had participated in the group's original banking Trojan attacks. There was Vladimir Dunayev, the expert in browser extensions. He was apprehended while traveling in South Korea and extradited to the US. Then there was Ala Witti, the 55-year-old Latvian mother of 2 who didn't even know what she was signing up for. She was extradited from her new home country of Suriname. Also that summer, President Biden publicly confronted Vladimir Putin during a phone call and demanded that he stop turning a blind eye to Russia's many ransomware groups. While Putin had enjoyed a comfortable relationship to Biden's predecessor, Biden was much more confrontational. Putin was also in an increasingly weak position internationally. Russia would eventually placate Biden by arresting another ransomware gang, Revil, as well as one of the hackers responsible for the Colonial Pipeline hack, which we just covered in a bonus episode. But as we'll see, Putin had his own reasons for doing so. Internal strife, arrests, counterattacks, and repeated public shaming were all bad news for WizardSpider. But early 2022, Putin would make a desperate gamble, and everything would soon fall apart. On January 13, 2022, Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Center began receiving a disturbing series of reports. Several government computer systems in the Ukraine were displaying the following message: "Your hard drive has been corrupted. In case you want to recover all hard drives of your organization, you should pay us $10K via Bitcoin wallet. We'll contact you to give further instructions." Microsoft has never divulged which government agencies were hit, but would only say that they provide critical executive branch or emergency response functions in the Ukraine. Only, not everything was like it seemed. Just 29 days later, on February 24th, men in camouflage took over border crossing between Crimea and the Ukraine. Then, at 4:50 a.m., Vladimir Putin made an emergency speech to his nation saying, "I have decided to conduct a special military operation to protect people who have been subjected to abuse and genocide by the Kiev regime for 8 years." This was a reference to the Ukraine's alleged persecution of Russian citizens in its Donbas region, but it's largely been proven to be baseless. Putin's speech also accused the Ukrainian government to be neo-Nazi. Minutes later, missiles and artillery began hitting targets outside the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Kharkiv, and the war was on. Now, back to that supposed Ukrainian ransomware attack. It was quickly determined that the attack was carried out on the orders of the Russian government. Money wasn't the objective. The goal was to disrupt the Ukrainian government. The timing was just too suspicious to be coincidental. On top of that, On January 14th, literally one day after the supposed ransomware attacks in the Ukraine, Putin ordered the arrest of the Rowley ransomware gang. In hindsight, this was an obvious smokescreen. Putin and Russia couldn't be responsible for any cyber shenanigans in the Ukraine because he was already busy cleaning up cyber shenanigans at home. See, you can trust him. And if you believe that, Moda Mischief has some lovely beachfront property in Siberia that we'd love to sell you. Wizard Spider wasn't responsible for that particular ransomware attack, and it's unknown if it participated at all in the invasion of the Ukraine, although it is likely. But even if Wizard Spider wasn't involved, we do know that many of its members supported the war, and this is exactly what led to its downfall. The day after the invasion, the group running the Conti ransomware posted a message on its website. And yes, it had a website. It used the site to promote its successful ransoms, so it's not entirely an idiotic idea. The message read, "The Conti team is officially announcing a full support of the Russian government. If anybody will decide to organize a cyber attack or any war activities against Russia, we are going to use all our possible resources to strike back at the critical infrastructures of an enemy." A pro-Putin message would seem like a smart idea, but it backfired. Like we said, Conti and Wizard Spider were based in Russia, but not only Russia. Some members hailed from places like Belarus, Latvia, or yes, Ukraine. Within days of Conti's pro-war statement, an anonymous user signed up for a Twitter account called Conti Leaks and began publishing internal chat messages from the Conti Rocket Chat channel, which is like Slack or Discord. 200,000 in total. It's never been confirmed who the leaker was. Some reported that they were a disgruntled Conti team member who went rogue. The person claiming to be the leaker also claimed to be a boring cybersecurity researcher. Either way, these chat messages gave an unprecedented look at the inner workings of a Russian ransomware group. Yes, the Conti team members discussed the technical aspects of their malware, and argued over whom they should be targeting, and discussed their negotiating strategies. But they also talked about everyday things like life, pop culture, and politics. Based on the chat messages, it was clear that many members truly did support war in the Ukraine, and believe Putin's claims about Zelensky running a neo-Nazi dictatorship. In one exchange, when a member pointed out that Zelensky is Jewish and that his grandfather fought the Nazis, the chat room devolved into Jewish jokes. Naturally, the release of 200,000 chat messages caused Wizard Spider's members to panic. Many left the organization and went on to work with smaller ransomware groups. But those who remained at Wizard Spider and its Conti ransomware team had a last-ditch plan to make one last big score. In April of 2022, 2 months after the publication of its documents, the Conti team launched its biggest ransomware attack yet, when it tried to hold the entire nation of Costa Rica at ransom. Conti launched the first probes on April 10th, but by the 18th, they'd broken into the servers of the Ministry of Finance, encrypting files and disabling both the digital tax service and the IT system for customs control. This essentially paralyzed the country's import-export industry, costing Costa Rica up to $38 million per day. It demanded a ransom of $20 million, which Costa Rica refused to pay, then lowered it to $15 million, which the country also declined. The ransomware gang continued attacking the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, as well as state and local governments across the country. Weeks after the attack, most files were still encrypted. When Rodrigo Chavez won Costa Rica's presidential election in May, he declared a state of emergency for the ransomware attack and effectively declared war on the group. But Conti wasn't done. Weeks later, they attacked the Costa Rican Social Security Fund, or CCSS, which controls the country's healthcare. Just like we saw in the US, Ireland, and many other countries, this ground Costa Rica's healthcare system to a halt. It's unknown how much the Conti attacks cost Costa Rica in the end, but definitely hundreds of millions of dollars, even if none of that included a ransom payment. But this attack would be a miscalculation on Conti's part for yet another reason. The United States had finally had enough. The U.S. pledged $25 million to help Costa Rica rebuild its computer systems. It also offered a $10 million reward for information on Conti's leadership, and another $5 million for information leading to Conti's members' arrests. In less than a year, the U.S. government was finally ready to name names. In February of 2023, the Treasury Department formally sanctioned 7 members of WizardSpider, specifically the Conti ransomware team. This allowed the U.S. Office of Foreign Asset Control to seize their assets, although admittedly, that's only the assets they could actually find and get their hands on. In June, the Justice Department issued indictments against those 7 plus an additional 2 WizardSpider members, along with their criminal aliases, date of birth, and email addresses. Mango, the Conti team leader who scolded his renegade employee for attacking the Irish Health Service executive, was identified as Mikhail Tsarev. The other 8 named members include Andrei Zhukov, aka Diff, aka Def, aka Defender, Maxim Galichkin, aka Bentley, Dmitry Putlin, aka Grad, aka Staff, Sergei Luganstov, aka Bejmont, aka Zulas, Max Mikhailov, aka Baguette, Maxim Rudensky, aka Fonin, aka Binman. Yes, like we've said before, there was no way Putin would allow any of those men to be extradited. At best, the US could hope one of them would travel to an allied country that would extradite them. But now that they were being put on blast, that was unlikely. The bigger victory was the decline of the use of Conti and its malware network TrickBot. Not because the US or other countries dismantled it, because they just became too well known to use. Technically, these indictments marked the end of WizardSpider, but ransomware is far from over. Unless you're a British accountant, you're probably not too familiar with Zealous, a company that provides payroll services. As of June 2023, Zealous was a popular file transferring program called MoveIt. Problem was, hidden in MoveIt's code was a security flaw, one that was already known to the dark web. And so, that June, many of Zealous's clients, like British Airways and the BBC, received a message. A group of online criminals had exploited MoveIt's security flaw to steal several terabytes worth of information. But who was this criminal group? They didn't match the MO of any previously known hacking group. The cybersecurity community didn't have much trouble finding an answer. Within days, a Russian ransomware group called C10P, pronounced Klop, took responsibility for the hack. Other victims began coming forward. These included public officials in Illinois, Nova Scotia, Johns Hopkins University, the University System of Georgia, and the European oil and gas company Shell. Even some U.S. federal agencies were breached, like the United States Department of Energy. Nobody paid the hackers ransom, and to this day, the hackers supposedly still have all that data. But notice that none of Klop's ransomware attacks involved encrypting files, and instead focused on holding information hostage. This is because so many victims of the attacks done by groups like WizardSpider refused to pay ransoms that the need to encrypt files essentially disappeared. This is how ransomware is evolving in 2023. In the end, it's impossible to calculate how much damage WizardSpider actually did. In 2021 alone, the Conti ransomware team attacked 1,000 victims and earned $180 million in ransom payments. Given that Conti and its predecessor Ryuk were both among the most successful ransomware programs in the time they were in operation, roughly 2018 to 2022, the gang's overall haul must be many times that. Then there's the economic cost of WizardSpider's activities. Like we said, their victims included everyone from small city governments to multinational corporations to national health services and even entire countries. Given that the Irish HSE attack alone cost $600 million to repair, the total number is in the billions. It may be true that the overall revenue of ransomware is falling. Ransomware gangs took in $300 million less in 2022 than they did in 2021, but it still remains a lucrative criminal enterprise, and it always will. so long as gangsters can keep tricking people into downloading suspicious email attachments. So, keep that spam filter updated, or you might find yourself caught up in the spider's web. I'm Keith Corneluk, and you're listening to Modem Mischief. Thanks for listening to Modem Mischief. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode, and also leave us a review. This show is an independent production and is wholly supported by you, our listeners, and the best way to support the show is to share it. And another way to support us is on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/modemmischief or click the link in the show notes. You can also support us through a paid subscription on Apple Podcasts. For as little as $5 a month, you'll receive an ad-free version of the show, plus bonus episodes exclusive to subscribers. Modem Mischief is brought to you by Mad Dragon Productions and is created, produced, and hosted by me, Keith Corneluk. This episode is written and researched by Jim Rowley. Edited, mixed, and mastered by Greg Bernhard, aka Wizard Spitter. The theme song You Are Digital is composed by Computer Bandit. Sources for this episode are available on our website at modemmischief.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media @Modem Mischief. Thanks for listening.